Eric, you got your
Perfect.
Can't do that.
Yes, we can.
Oh, we can?
We can hear them.
Oh, thank you.
How are you doing?
I never saw that. Okay.
It's been slow.
Yeah. So take care of it.
Okay, well, welcome. You guys okay there? Yes. So, on behalf of the Provost Teaching Academy, let me welcome you back to our workshop series. The next workshop, as you can see, will be on Friday, the 21st of October, and we'll deal with designing authentic learning outcomes for teaching and assessments. So definitely, if you're interested in that, sign up, and we'd love to have you join them. So today, Jean and myself will be looking at large lectures, those enormous classes. Sometimes they're 40 students, 60 students, 500 students, 1,000 students. They have these amazing scales and size. And what we'd like to do in the workshop is really sort of first begin by telling you a little bit about the organization. We will have 2 workshops. This is the first of 2. In this workshop, what we will do is, of course, define what is a large lecture and why should you do it. What is an interactive large lecture? Number 3, what are the best new teaching strategies and pedagogies for large lectures? And what are you currently doing? We really want to hear from you and see what you're actually engaged in, what are your questions, how you're approaching this differently than we do, right? Knowing that you're closer to the generation and that we're learning from and with them. The second workshop, we are really going to look specifically at the new technologies and their impact. What are these new emerging technologies? How could they begin to transform these large lectures? And then, what are you doing? What are your concerns? Some of you are teaching these enormous large lectures. You, as I said, surf's up. You're riding the board. You're learning about the rocks, the big waves, right? The sharks that come by. So it's really going to be the second workshop, a real hands-on design session. So please bring your laptop. Be prepared to kind of engage in this kind of open interaction. So today what we're going to do in this first workshop is spend probably 20, 25 minutes talking about what large lecture workshops are, and then having a kind of breakout session where we really have interaction back and forth. So that's really the format. So let me turn this over. Well, let me begin, I guess, by just defining what is a large lecture. I think the most important thing about the large lecture is it is a kind of industrial model. It began with the Industrial Revolution, the idea that you were passing on a series of skills and bodies of knowledge to large quantities of workers or citizens at one time, before the internet, before the pervasive publication of textbooks and the sharing of knowledge in knowledge communities. So it really was a way to give that. Secondly, this particular lecture that you're looking at is what we call the Centennial Lecture Series, which is our stellar lecture series where we invite international, how would I say, famous people and intellectuals to come. Susan Sontag. This is, of course, Noam Chomsky talking about the questions of the world. So if you don't know about the Centennial Lecture, sign up for those. I would really encourage that, or you can ask us more about it. But I think during this lecture, as you notice, everybody is captivated. They are sharing in the way he's thinking. He is posing questions. He said that all you need to do in life is ask the question why 3 times, and you will get to the core of the generative question. Why? Generally, they talk about what it is. Second time, they talk about methods. Third time, they talk about values and beliefs. So it's a really beautiful thing. And you notice everybody's captivated. There's nobody on their cell phone, no one texting each other, no one on things. They're really engaged in that moment. They're engaged in that sharing. So why do it today? I mean, that becomes a real fundamental question as you begin to structure your large lecture. Why do it? Yes, we need a certain number of students in the various majors, but why really? What does this extra large forum give us that no other particular forum can give us? I think the important thing is developing a personal learning ecology. Not just a personal mindset of how to operate in the world, but an ecology, a living connectivity with other intellectual people around us, sharing ideas, beginning to understand how to do that on the internet, face-to-face in conversation, working in groups. But it is this idea that it's a living system, and you're really trying to not just allow the students to think critically, but begin to form a sustainable ecology that allows them to gain new ideas, test those ideas, work through those, and the questions of their field. So the problems, oh my gosh. If you do go online and you Google large lecture, bad classes, large lecture, class problems, you will find normally 8 to 10 major problems. The first one is that they are impersonal. That at one time they're too big, they're too large. I'm lost in the crowd. There are several strategies to get around that. Don't stand behind the lectern. Walk around and break down the barrier between you and the students. Form small student groups. So break a cohort of 400 into 6 or 8 people. Begin to, at one time, learn people's names. Right? That's very, very important. You might not learn all 400. But you could learn a few. Or you do what I do, and that is just call out names and then talk to people. Hey, Wen. Hey, Lee. Hey, Bill. Hey, Jane. And someone will eventually raise their hand and talk to you. So, I mean, there's other ways around it that you can kind of break down those barriers. The second one is, at one time, it's passive. It precludes interaction. It includes questions and answers. So I think one of the things you can do is, why are students really engaged? They want to see how you think versus how they think. So I think one of the things important, pose a question that's important to the field. Have a provocative conversation. Walk around with a mic and talk and think together. The third one is, it's boring. You drone on for 75 minutes, the students say. The student today generally has an attention span between 7 and 12 minutes. So mix it up. Change it up. Share your research. I think that's always one of the most important things. You're passionate about your field and discipline. Allow the students to understand how to make a contribution in your field, what you're doing with that, and how you're making a difference. Bring it always back to the students' lives. So I always think that's very important. And if you deal with a blog or a website, post your lectures so that the students who do have difficulty can, of course, watch those. The fourth one is, it doesn't engage my learning style. And I think the important thing there is everyone doesn't learn the same way. Some people are textual learners, voice learners, visual learners. So mix it up. Utilize voice, text, images, videos, demonstrations, and guests, people from the profession. The fifth one is they copy answers off of each other, right? Use multiple versions. Use things other than quizzes and exams. Number 6, they're always on their laptops and phones. Some people outlaw those. No, you may not have this technology, right? I tend to be a person who allows them to use the technology. So someone is using a phone, I take my mic, I walk over to them, we're posing this question, tell them what you discovered and found. You'd be surprised, instantly, all those devices either get used correctly or they all disappear. So it's really engaging them that it isn't just a passive thing, that it really is, how would we use this technology to enhance that? Number 7, the lack of feedback and evaluation. It's only grading. Invite your students to your office hours. Invite them before and after class to have conversations. Even for online students. I have 1,000 online students every semester, and we Skype and we have conversations if necessary. The last one is, not every professor is an engaging public speaker. That is true. There's a performance aspect to standing up. Or you break that down and you have a conversation. So you get over that fear factor by connecting to individuals, by breaking the room into smaller cohorts. Watch the TED Talks. There are a lot of people who don't know how to do that. But I think these are some of the problems that we see and are encountering today. So let me turn it over to Jean to talk a little bit about large interactive lectures.
So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my experience with large lectures to begin with. I've been doing large lectures at the Polytech campus, 60 to 150, since I've been out there for the past 10 years. And I decided that when I started doing large lectures, I wasn't going to do 75 minutes of talking. So I've always done interactive lectures with large groups. And I found a definition online of interactive lectures, and interactive lectures can be defined as at least once during the lecture, you have a time that students can interact with the material that you are having them learn. And some of the reasons for this is one of the things that Max said. First of all, students have a very limited, and all people have a very limited amount of time that they can listen to someone. So this is one of the reasons why we're having the two of us talk. We reach a limit of talking. So it's about 15 minutes. And I think that modern students today, it's even less. So one of the things an interactive lecture will do is allow students to break it up and learn more material, actually. I always tell new faculty that less is so often more. Another thing is that students can learn better if they have time to, it's been shown that people can learn better if they have time to process the material. So that interactive material allows them to process the information, and students learn better also if they have time to apply the material. So very often I will lecture on a concept, and then we'll break up and apply that material to a problem or to reading a graph or whatever. I teach biology, so that's how I do it. And then another thing I like about interactive lectures is that it allows all the students in the classroom to participate, not just the really vocal people. So this is one of the reasons why I like interactive lectures. So we're going to move on to talk about what are some of the strategies that people use here at ASU and around the country for large interactive lectures.
So this is a wonderful slide that I love, which is Johns Hopkins. And as you notice, this happens to be a medical classroom dealing with, how would we say, infants and various diseases. You'll notice there's a presenter who's actually a doctor who works with those cases. There are 4 students who are actually responding to that presentation. Then you'll notice all of the class is on their laptops doing deeper research into those evolving issues and then feeding the whole thing into a public forum. It's one of the nicest slides and classes I've attended in a while. So here at ASU, what are some of the best practices for this? And so we have 12 that we're going to share with you. We talked about active learning here on the left, the idea of having a dialogue with your students and walking around. Collaborative learning, you want to talk a little bit about life science there in the center, what you guys are doing?
This is actually in Tempe campus, but it's talking about having students get into groups and research different materials and then report out to the group as a whole, I imagine.
And then over at the business school, we have case-based learning, looking specifically at problems or corporations and how they're dealing with business challenges, much like a law school or medical school would do. Down at the Cronkite School, there's a series of important literature reviews going on with journalism. In that particular case, looking at Hispanic stories or going out in the community and sharing those, so reviewing original documents, how do we begin to work through those to create a story, and how do we begin to record that. Problem-based learning, In the case of the engineering school, a series of, in this case, a structural challenge, a design challenge, where they're being asked to design a bridge. They were broken into small groups and actually worked through that, researching and then physically making it. The last one is over at Life Science, and that's a beautiful physics course, what I call the Mr. Science demonstrations, which we all love, and so do the students. You know, when you make giant clouds appear or lasers go across the laboratory, nothing better than hands-on demonstrations. Over at the law school, down at the brand new building downtown, if you've not been down there, go down and see the mock trials and the mock juries where they actually role play by actually having people be judges and having both sides and being defendants and being persons that are rowdy. The education school does Quest for Teach, which is using gamification. So they have a virtual classroom that all of their young teachers go into and learn what it would be like to teach in an elementary school out there. They also have, in that particular setting, disruptive students, conflicts, even crises, like a shooter comes into the classroom. And it really pre-prepares those and empowers those students as they begin to go out. School of Social Transformation and several other schools use clickers, either a separate standalone device or their phones to get live responses. I won't say it's a game show, but at a certain time, you know, oh, let's find out what the most popular answer is. Oh, no, 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 that's not what we were talking about. So it gives you immediate feedback on how things are going. And then down here is the ASU Film School dealing with multimedia. The film school is not based in Hollywood. That's a problem. No, it's not a problem. What the film faculty do is Skype in the leading actors, actresses, directors into their classroom. So here's an interactive conversation between the actors, the money guy, the producer, live with the students. So getting them engaged, even internationally, is really exciting. Podcasting, I'll do that in the design school. With my class, we do a set of design challenges, and podcasting allows them to do YouTube videos, put up their work, allow us to review in a 1-minute video their progress of moving through those applications. And the last one is in the English department dealing with portfolios. So the students have a writing portfolio. In many cases, they can put it up on the web, they can share it internationally with poets and writers, or if they're in journalism, with journalists, and get feedback. So these are just some of the ways that the ASU faculty are breaking down those boundaries of a traditional stand in front and lecture class. So we're going to talk a little bit about our two classes in the next few minutes, just so you can get an idea of what we've been doing. Go ahead, Jean.
Okay, so I teach Bio 182 out at the Polytech campus. We usually have between 96 and 120 students in that class, and it's in an auditorium-style classroom. And I use, the interesting thing about interactive classes is I use a variety of techniques, and I usually mix it up. I don't use the same thing every day, except for there is one trend that I have. I do use clickers. I use a course interactive system. And that is a way that I actually give students points for attendance, for attending and participating. And I use the clicker system to easily log that in. And a lot of people say, well, if you have clickers, there can be cheating. And I actually do a very strict policy that if you use bring somebody else's clickers in, you lose all your points, they lose all their points. And then I have a verification system that we do activities and we hand in sheets, and I can verify that they've been there by if I think there's a problem. And since I've gone to that, I've had no problems with people cheating on their clickers. So I like the course response system because you can do a lot of different things with it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I also usually start my lectures with a question or a story. something that I know something about the topic maybe, or a question we're going to answer that day. And sometimes I actually will, if it's something that I think the students might have experience with, I have them form a group right away and write down what they know about that topic. Or I might be, for instance, I do a lecture on evolution. Our class, the second semester of Bio 1A2 is very biodiversity based. So I'll do a lecture on evolution, and one of the things I do is I do a poll that kind of brings out some of the misconceptions about evolution. So I have questions up, and I have them answer them in the beginning of the class, and usually their answers are false. They're not correct. And then at the end of the class, after we've had the lecture, we bring up the course response system and we do it again. And they learn where their misconceptions are. So there's different ways of using that type of clicker system. I also, almost every class, or every class usually, I have them either break up into small groups, usually 2 or 3, because that works the best in a large lecture situation, an auditorium, because they can talk to the person next to them. This allows them to meet people. It's not always the same group. They might have a different partner. Sometimes we actually break up into large groups that I actually have them get up and walk around. I have the students, when we start our activity, I make one of the people in the group get up, walk down, and pick up the sheet. Because I lecture at noon, and that's when people are really sleepy. Yeah. So I have them get up and move around. So sometimes we have large groups that I have them form, and I sometimes have them pick up index cards to find out what large group they're going to be in for an activity. So I do different things at different times with the groups. Usually the groups will be applying maybe what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So we might be looking at graphs, looking at research data. I do a lecture on food webs that I talk about what a food web is, and then I have an example, and they have to construct a food web. And then they answer clicker questions on it. What were the primary producers in this food web? And they all can participate and learn in that way. So I also very much rely on short video clips. This is the generation that likes video clips. I try and learn all the names of the people in my class. I was telling Max that I was looking at my course reviews from last spring, and I had a couple students in the comment section when she actually makes an attempt to learn our names. I really admire that. So I do that different ways. I have the students the first week for their homework actually create a blog about themselves. And I have in the blog, this is last year, it was the first year I did this, have in the blog something you'd like me to know about you. And I got the most interesting things, volunteer activities they were involved in. Some of them were veterans, some of them had children. And then in the beginning of class, after I've set up, I usually show a movie about the organisms we might be studying that day. And they could be watching that. And then I go around into different parts of the class and introduce myself to the students during the first 2 or 3 weeks. And I talk to them about what their career plans are or something about themselves. And so I get to know the people that way. And that really, I think, is very effective. Of course, I think after you have 120 students, it would be really difficult to do that. If I had 400, I might use your techniques. So I use a lot of visual aids in our classrooms at Polytech. We have doc cams. So a lot of times I'll use the doc cams to actually show something, an organism that we might be studying that day. So they can look at it, and we'll go over the plants part. So when we do plants, I'm a plant person, you can tell up here. A lot of people in my classes are pretty healthy, and they're not really that interested in plants. I kind of say, well, why should you be interested in plants? Plants are a lot of drug development is from plants. So I give them a reason to study plants, but we might go over parts of the plant, and then I have them pick up. I have my lab assistants collect plants. I have them pick up plants, and they can look at the parts of the flower, of different types of flowers, and draw them and work at them in groups. And they go like, oh, this is a lot different than the diagram. So, and then we go over it with the doc cam. So there's lots of ways that I have them interact with the material. And I think that my advice would be to mix it up. Right. Try different things, different times. Don't be afraid to try things. Sometimes I've done things that have been abysmal failures, but at least, but most of the time, it ends up being a success. One of the things I do is I try to challenge them to see what scientists do. So when we start talking about organisms, I either find a short video clip of somebody that works with that organism that describes their research, or I do have people in our department that come in and might speak for 15 minutes about bats, or have a short portion of the lecture that they talk about their research about reptiles or different things. So that really adds to the fact that they can see that science is not just a collection of facts, but learning things. So those are some of the things that I do, and I have really enjoyed doing large lectures. I think Max is right that dealing with large lectures, I almost have a large lecture persona. So I'm kind of in that persona today because we're on TV here, but I have that I mean, I am definitely not I'm kind of a quiet, shy person. So my main problem last semester is I had back-to-back lectures, and I had a group of 15 students, and I interact with them quite a bit different. And then I went into the 120. So I had in the time in between, I had to get myself into that large lecture persona. But I think it definitely is a worthwhile way of interactive lectures of doing these introductory classes.
Yeah, and getting people excited about the topic. I teach ALA 100, an Introduction to Environmental Design. In person, I have 500 students in one of the large lecture halls. And then online, I have another 500 students that I deal with interactively with various online. I'm supported by 8 teaching assistants. I do not use teaching assistants. I use co-instructors. So whatever I do, they do. They teach, they lecture, they meet the students. So I'm really trying to mentor them along in that particular process. It's about design thinking, which is touching all disciplines today. What is the emergent way of thinking about difficult, wicked, complex problems? How do we structure our thinking? How do we observe the world? How do we visualize that? How do we reframe questions? How do we make prototypes? How do we begin to bring about impactful change? So what I do in the course is maybe a little different. I lecture live. I also have a series of what's called Inside the Designer Studio. So I have 12 guests who come in. Anybody who's doing architecture design, people who are doing gaming design, people who are filmmakers. So I really show people the impact of design in many fields and have these guests come in and interact with them. I have 3 projects which are done in groups. I take this large cohort, both in person and online, and divide it into groups of 8 students. So they work in small interactive teams. And they're given a design challenge. The first one is the lightest cardboard chair that will support 200 pounds without glue or tape. So it really forces them to build an object, set on it with their body, start to really see how those things can change. Another one of the exercises I do is to go out into the community and find a design challenge with a non-for-profit. So they go out and work for non-for-profits all over Arizona. What can we do for you? Can we design a poster? Can we do t-shirts? Can we do a particular fundraising event? Oh, you need a website. You need a Facebook page. Oh, no, you need a Kickstarter campaign. And one group actually established and designed that for them, and they raised $15,000 in 2 weeks. So you really want students to get out, understand that their particular field of study can impact and make a difference. So we do that. We use YouTube, as I explained earlier. None of them know how to make videos. None of them know how to post it. By the end of 2 weeks, they all are experts at it. And one thing that's very important is they've all seen a lot of film and video. So putting up a bad video doesn't exist because they know, they've seen this stuff, right? They've seen the little bobcat and the mouse. So they've seen whatever, so they really are good about it. We don't do quizzes and exams. We do all blog discussions, and I use peer grading. 50% of the grade is peer graded, which keeps them accountable to each other. And I found that to be really, really powerful as a tool to really give them a rubric, ask them to really have conversations, establish grades. It's been really very, very effective. And it's a lot of fun, too. And I think picking up on Gene, I mean, as a designer, problems are always evolving. So if something doesn't work one day, I just change it up, right? It's nothing to make a kind of modification, whether you have to change the syllabus, whether you have to change the grading standard. But I'm pretty fluid with that. And the students respect that fluidity. I think one of the things that's really important is ask your students how we're doing. How are you doing? How am I doing? As you all know, any large lecture class has a Facebook page where the students post everything that goes on. The answers, the quizzes, the history of the course, everything they know. So feel free to use that interaction. So I think one thing that's very important is always ask yourself, what is your pedagogical vision and what tools you're using, whether they're classroom tools of interaction, whether they're online tools, but I think it's really important to really ask why and how you're going about that. So we're going to throw it open, I guess. So what we're going to do now is really have a conversation with you about what you're teaching relative to the large lectures that you're working on, a kind of question and answer to help you. We have colleagues on all campuses, so you can do that with the colleague that's there. We'll leave this on. If you have a question for us, we can do it that way too. Right?
Okay.
So do you want to share what you're teaching and your name? Sorry.
Sure. I'm Sydney Schaefer. I'm in the School of Biological and Health Systems Engineering. And I'm not teaching a large lecture yet, but I will be next year. Research methods, so basically statistics to undergraduate students. And from what I understand, it's about 120 students.
Oh.
So that's about my size class, yeah.
Do you have any questions or things we might be able to help you? Other than stepping in and teaching it for you?
Right. I mean, I'm actually sitting in on the class now with the person who's currently teaching, and a lot of the methods and tricks that have been proposed here, she's already doing, so it's great. And the students are actually really engaged, so it's great to sort of put the theory and the application together. So, no, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
My name is Giuseppe Mascaro. I'm in the School of Sustainable Engineering and Built Environment, and I teach fluid mechanics for 63 students.
Oh, okay.
And I think they show up in 40, 45. They've been showing up. It's kind of standard. It's kind of standard from the very first day.
Mm-hmm.
So from the very first day, so it's not me.
I don't know. It's fluid. It might be a leak.
I filled in the academic status report, because they had one test. So I had one test, and they came, all of them that were presented that day. So I filled in the academic status report, and the class after they came to class, because I told them you have to come to class. Otherwise, you won't pass it. The degrees were like D, right? D, C, and so they came. So that was one way. So is it a big class, 62? I would say yes.
Yes.
Okay. What's a large class, for example?
Mm-hmm.
It's 20 students. The threshold, is there a threshold or?
No. I think it's pretty much how you define it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I mean, in architecture in Italy, there's 4,000 in a class. That's the normal size of an architectural studio, right? So it's just an enormous thing, but only a certain cohort comes, and then they all show up for the exams, which are held in multiple places. So I think it's relative to the discipline, too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for us, 400 is a large class.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in a studio setting, when we're working one-on-one, it's 12 students always. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much a hands-on, shared system in that. And then for you guys, in addition to your class, you have what other kind of small interactions with the fluid dynamics students?
We have in the class, so I have a classroom pretty much like this, but with just the chairs with a little table here. So it's hard to divide them into groups, because when I give problems and I ask them, please solve it, I would like to have them a little bit of interaction. Actually, what I was thinking is I have bimodal distribution. The way the way I'm seeing the grades now. So I would like to sample a little bit of the good students and have them leading groups, right, to solve problems and kind of help the other ones. Because I'm taking also another set of workshops in engineering about teaching, It's an NSF project, and it seems that the level of transfer information that I can provide to them is different from what they can provide from between each other.
Exactly.
So they learn much faster if a peer will. That's how this concept is applied. And me, for me it's obvious. You have to apply that way, of course, right? So I didn't tell you this, but that was obvious for me. So I would like to do this, but again, the type of classroom that I have. And then I would like to know about the clickers. That would be very interesting. Because I can transfer somehow, I can use problems and use the clickers to kind of engage them.
Yeah.
So is it a wide list?
It's the company that ASU uses is called Turning Point, and if you go to your My ASU page and it says Clickers at ASU. If you click on that, it'll give all the information that you need. But they either can do it on their phones or or purchase the clicker itself, the device. But and then at the end of class, you actually get, some people actually grade on the accuracy of their answers, but I just use it for attendance that they get. If they click in, they get attendance points for that
Which
day.
next time I will do because, these 20 people that are missing.
Yeah, and it really promotes them if they know that it's like kind of like the carrot and the stick, I guess, because once they start attending, then they realize there is value in attending.
Oh, yeah, of course. And this is something that is happening in other classes in engineering. So I've been asking around and saying, you guys, my colleagues, what's happening here? Oh, yeah, it's normal.
Yeah, and it doesn't. I don't think it needs to. Yeah, it doesn't need to be normal. I think in my 120, I do have people that can attend that particular day, but my attendance levels are pretty good, maybe 85, 90%. And I think part of it is that I do have that as part of their grade. And then, they can work in groups with their problems and click in answers. It's just not a multiple choice thing. They can actually click in numbers. And there are representatives on each campus. If you get on there, you can have a representative come over, and actually they're very happy to come over and talk to you and work with you on it.
Well, the issue that you raised, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's Bobby at the downtown campus. I'm here with Shelby, and neither of us teach really large classes, but I do have a question for you, Jean. You were talking about using clickers to take attendance, which obviously means that they're tied to an identity. And yet, if you're talking about evolution, I wonder if there is any kind of anonymous program as well that they could participate in about their ideas about evolution, and then you can kind of see at the end, because if they know that they're being monitored for their identity, they may not be as willing to really, express their views. So is there a way of doing an anonymous version of that as well as your attendance version?
Their clickers are tied to their identity, but I do go through, I think when you're teaching evolution, I have to be really respectful of the student's opinion. NSF actually has a statement that I read that they recommend to say that you're not challenging their religious beliefs when you're teaching evolution. And then we actually have, as part of the evolution series, I do have them get into discussion groups and talk about how some of the things that we talk about might challenge them or how they feel about it, and that is just in their group. It's kind of anonymous. I don't have them report back to me. It's kind of, but with the clickers, it isn't usually. I don't know if there's an anonymous mode. That might be something that the representative might be able to help with. There might be a way of making it anonymous, but I'm not sure how to do it.
I also just have one. I'm sorry. I had just one other question that may take us off track. If it does, let's not go there. But with the new MOOCs, and the edX, EdPlus, et cetera, maybe we should have another session on how to deal with something like that, because you have thousands of students, and some are taking it for credit, some are not taking it for credit, et cetera. So, and it's all online. So I'd be interested in knowing, either now or in another session, how that would differ from what you're doing with the large group.
I think it's a great question because we didn't really talk about it today, but here at ASU there is how do we say, standalone entity called Ed Plus, which is our online. We are a partner with edX, so we're doing a set of those courses. For instance, Don Johansson is doing, the person who discovered Lucy is actually doing a course on anthropology. His generation versus the next generation, going out and looking at how archaeologists worked then, now, and in the future. And so it's very engaging because you're looking at how that wisdom of generations is being uncovered and looked through. And in that course is 18,000 students. And so there are 3 PhD students who are actually helping him with that. There are pop-up lectures with unfolding questions. There's hands-on exercises. And I think one of the nicest things to answer Bobby's question, it's an ongoing thing. I'm doing a new course on the introduction of design for edX. And I'm in the middle of the process of really developing it. And the nice thing is the people who we have in Ed Plus can write any software. They know what a Hollywood production is. They're very, very young people who know what gamification is. And so we're thinking differently about that. But I would really encourage you, if you're interested in doing one of those kind of courses, is to go over to Ed Plus. They have a set of workshops. They're always happy to give you a tour and really see what's happening, or talk to us.
Are they at the SkySong facility?
Yes, they are. They're in
Okay.
Sky. Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about grading in these large classes. What you said, some of it is you do peer grading, which sounds really interesting to me. But what are the strategies for grading 400 students?
The strategies for grading 400 students. Number one is getting a clear rubric. Be sure you understand what you're asking for and what they need. So having a grading rubric that people can understand, I'm being asked for this many points, I think is very important. Having your TAs and everyone who's going to be grading that understand what feedback is, what evaluation is, and what grading is. So being sure that you're always giving feedback. Oh, this is what you're talking about. You might look at this. Giving evaluation. You did this well. Oh, there's a writing center here at ASU. They can help you to write more clearly. I don't have time to go through and mark all this up. Please go see this, or come meet with the TA if you're having problems in this situation, or myself, and we can kind of do that. And then grading against the standard, points, etc. And in the case of the grading portion, or all 3 of those, we allow the students to give 50% of that effort, and we do that. And it takes a lot of time, right, with 400 students. But once we break them into a group, the group is doing a chair. The group is doing one of those. So that's, you divide it by 8, so suddenly we only have 60 of those to grade with 8 TAs, and so it's reasonable and manageable.
Thank you.
So try to, you want to have individual feedback and evaluation, and then the grading can be at different scales within the course. Do you have any grading thoughts or suggestions?
I do a variety of things. I use the clickers for participations. We do have exams in this class, and I use Scantrons, but I understand now that you can use clickers for exams also. So I'm looking into doing that next semester. My cohort in Bio 181 at Polytech did that this year. So because I also give multiple copies of the exams to prevent cheating. I mean, I don't have, I have 2 or 3 copies. I mean, I have 3 copies of the exam. I also use Mastering Biology, which is an online homework system. So they do homeworks every week. And it is a really good system as far as giving feedback to the students if they get a question wrong. Then I have lab. Each of the students has to take a lab. So they're in smaller groups, 24, with the lab, our instructional professionals who teach labs at Polytech. And I work very closely with them as far as making the labs and lectures, the topics be together. So there's various ways that we grade.
And you?
So I've never taught a large lecture class in my life. It's
Oh,
always
it's
been
time.
seminars. And so
Time.
that's one thing I thought of was, I mean, I spend a lot of time grading, but I don't have that many students. So what would it look like
Yeah.
scaled?
You had a question?
Go ahead.
Mastering, is it mastering in biology?
Mastering biology.
That's the Pearson,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Because last time I asked you, it was the very end of the seminar that we had, I got the offer from Pearson about mastering in engineering.
Mhm.
So do you think it's useful for?
I think it's really useful because you can, there's different things in the mastering biology. There's just standard questions, like multiple choice questions, but they have animations to explain material. They have current events. You can link to either video or news articles from the New York Times about the topic that you're talking about. So it can bring it into how this information is applied. And so there can be problems that they can work. There's different options that you have. So you go into the mastering program and you decide what the questions are going to be for that week. And they can get practice.
They have to buy that.
Yes.
Right.
So they buy it as part of the book. So we have it, the book that we have, or if they can buy an ebook, or they can just buy mastering. But it's about I think it's cost them about $60. But we use it in both semesters of the class. So we use it in the first semester and the second semester. We coordinate. So they're buying it usually for the 2 semesters. So the cost is not that high.
So my students have been complaining about the cost of the book that I use.
Mhm.
They say, I'm not going to use it anymore. I mean, no, you have to have it in your library, right? In the future, as an engineer, whenever you have a chance of using fluid mechanics in your career, you have the book. So I'm trying to convince them, but I cannot really. So on top of the book, they have also other $60 in that case. I was thinking if this is doable for them.
One of the ways that we're able to do that in architecture is we take them over to Overup's office in Los Angeles, the great engineers, right? And we go see the fluid dynamics people, and they have the books there.
Yeah.
And to have a professional tell you, I use this book and it's open on my desk, and this is why these books
I
are
like the books a lot.
But I think to have a professional in a leading firm who's doing international work on the cutting edge say that is different than you saying it. Oh my God, I think it's just selling the book, right? Versus having a professional say, this is an essential source. So what are you going to do in research methods?
What do you mean?
I don't know. I got a.
So one of the nice things that the current practice member is doing is she poses problems and she'll show videos of like, okay, this biotech firm is developing this new,
Great.
insulin release, device or something, and they're prototyping this, and they're trying to shoot for a, accuracy rate of blah. And then we apply concepts like determine the 95% confidence interval. And so it's taking problems that are very relevant to the student rather than leading with the theory and then them trying to find the application on their own.
Perfect.
But it's like, here's a sort of a mock data set, and but these numbers come from a device that you probably have learned about in some of your other classes. And so I think she's done a lot of this work already in sort of getting it ready for the other person to come in and help teach it.
Well, it'd be interesting to take that, go to La Jolla, go into one of the drug companies,
Sure.
and say, this is how this is going to the next level.
Sure.
So I think this idea that you set up these, how would I call it, scenarios,
Yes.
and then they work through this data set's one thing, and then to get them to the next level, either going out and interviewing with research methods in these drug companies, which they probably won't tell you too much. But I think connecting with these people, which eventually will place them in internships or mentorship, or they start to, how would I say, you anteing up on them to ask more serious questions about what they're learning, I think would be an important next step with them. I always say it's never too early to get them engaged in the field,
Yeah.
no matter what their discipline is, right? Especially young freshmen and young undergrads, so that they then become, oh my gosh, I could do this, or no, there's a gap between two fields that I just need to enter into. It should be fun.
Yeah. And to your point of hearing from a professional, I use statistics every day And so it's not just a thing you have to learn and then move on. Like, I can't do my job unless I know this information.
Right. I think it's one thing for us to,
Sure.
we jump
Yeah.
up and down, we're enthusiastic.
Yeah,
I mean, you know the things that make great lectures. I mean, you're enthusiastic, you really understand the passion and the excitement, you understand great communication, you understand the kind of impact of why a topic's important to you.
And I think adding your personal experience is good, and I don't think you would need to be every lecture, but just maybe doing it once or twice during a semester would be just showing that somebody outside the university and how they use statistics would be
Right.
great.
See, in our research methods, we go out and we interview people not only in our field, but multiple fields. So we take a client or a banker or anybody who's involved in the environment and building, and we make them utilize research methods to go out and really unpack that, and then question how the methodology might be different. What are the gaps in the research method?
So does anybody over at downtown or west have any questions? Or want to share what they're teaching in a large lecture? Or will be?
Would you like to teach one?
No, you're not.
Just so you know, I taught research methods at every single level, undergraduate.
There's the answer to your
And
question.
one of the best things about teaching research methods is that they're
So low.
Somebody's
trying to get here.
and they go, that was a pretty good class.
Is that good we have somebody on? Should we have somebody on the line over at one of the other campuses?
Well, I was just saying I did teach large lectures, but I won't tell you how many decades ago that was because it was in graduate school. And we were still using overheads, et cetera. But I did use a lot of the small group kind of thing that you're talking about, and it was very effective. It was a large lecture on Spanish grammar, and I had to keep them from falling asleep. So I'd say something and then say, okay, let's use it, not just in a sentence, but in a dialogue or something. And so it kind of brought that classroom, ethos into the lecture. Because now, do your large lectures, Jean or Max, have breakout sessions as well, or are they just in that large lecture?
In Bio 182, they do break out into labs each week, so they have a smaller group that they're interacting with.
So no, not in ALA 100, but being that they're doing these design challenges like constructing a cardboard chair, we have some in-class time for that, but in many cases they will be doing it on their own in unofficial precepts or breakout. So I think it can be formalized or informal depending on the particular problem.
Because I way back in college, I took a large lecture, in art history, and that was great, but I really enjoyed the breakout sessions of about 8 to 10 people where we were able to really get into the material. And if you have that, you may decide to teach your lecture differently. If you don't have that, you may want to put more interaction in, or put interaction in anyway, but the amount and the type might differ depending on whether or not you have that extra session. So that would be something to think about.
One of the challenges, it seems to me, with breaking down into small groups in large lectures is so many of our large classrooms, the desks are bolted to the ground. This is actually a little bit easier, but, it's really difficult, and there's not space for people to congregate around the sides or in the aisles. So it can be really challenging to figure out a way of getting that done, and I don't really know what the answer for that is, because depending on the size, does anybody have any thoughts of how you manage that, given that sometimes the logistics just don't allow for the students to kind of gather together?
I have 500. I teach in Neeb Hall, which has 500 seats. When we do breakout sessions, the students sit in their groups. They kind of either together or in 2 rows together. And then if we do a breakout session, outside. They go out, then they come back and report. So we just I allow that walls of the classroom just to allow them to go anywhere, but you need to be here and check in at the end.
The other, I've had the same
Yeah.
situation in a large, again, like Bobby, is a long time ago, but I used to teach 200 in lecture. And in that situation, I usually just have to pair that quite a bit. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's easy to pair, but,
Yeah.
you know.
It's harder if you have larger groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also useful if you have TAs in terms of attendance. I had my TAs oversee attendance. When the students came in, they needed to go to their TA to indicate that they were there. So it's also a way of doing it without clickers and to get the TAs involved more fully. And then the TAs would tell me if students were brave enough to, I mean, I could generate some discussion in the larger lecture, and I told the TAs to notice that so they could get extra points because they knew the names better than I did. They did have breakout sessions once a week, but they also monitored for student involvement during the lecture itself, and that was really helpful.
Yeah, I think some of the classrooms, it is difficult how they're constructed, but you can have people get up. They don't have to be, I'm really a firm believer that they shouldn't be, every lecturer shouldn't be sitting in one place the whole lecture. Just for an hour and 15 minutes, it's just not a good thing. So I actually, and I think your idea about having students pair into groups of different different ways in which you can pair students together. You can create groups. I've actually done that in classes where I've had students with different levels of experience or and actually created groups. And they didn't need to be the same groups every time. So you can tell students, this is your group, and this is, you know, and to work out problems or whatever.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention something, as you talked about the academic status report.
Yeah.
And I teach, about 1:30 in my class. And the two big things is to make sure that you do those academic status reports, because students disappear. When you have a class over about 60, then they can just drop right off the radar, and they don't think anybody notices. And when they get that, it's a great wake-up call that somebody's actually tracking them.
Right.
And the second thing I do is my top students, the ones that get the top scores, I write them a personal email after each test, before I post a grade. So I write them an email and say, I haven't posted a grade yet. I want you to know that you got 100%. You must have worked really hard. That's great. And I always get a very positive response, because again, it's the anonymity, like I'm in a big class, nobody knows I'm doing well, and it actually makes me learn who my top students are, because I'm typing in their names. And then after the fourth test, I've typed in their names 4 times, like, okay, that's a student, when they ask me for a letter of recommendation, I really remember them.
That's great.
Yeah, those academic status reports are incredibly important, and in fact, it's important to do it earlier. Because we found that retention, if students aren't showing up the first week or two, the likelihood of their dropping out is significantly greater. So we have to be able to reach out to them as early as possible, particularly for those for whom it's just not working. For whatever reason, if they need to withdraw, get them to make that decision early enough so that they can get some money back. It's also an ethical and financial issue we want to retain every student, but some, it's just not the right time for them. So the earlier that we reach out to them, the earlier it may be that they can cancel their registration and still get at least a partial refund of the tuition, and that's really important for our students.
I didn't realize that the academic status report got kicked to the college advisors. So
Automatically.
They are personally contacted. And I talked to a college advisor who, she was personally following up on all the freshmen who didn't show up to the first week of class. And she said, you know what the #1 reason was that they didn't show up to class? And I'm thinking, they partied or something like that. Couldn't find classroom. That was the #1
And they're too
reason.
embarrassed to ask somebody.
Find the classroom.
Wow.
But we now have apps that will take
There is
Here you go.
And I do that same thing that Deb said. Because it is a freshman class, after the first 2 weeks, I look at my clickers, and people who have only shown up once or not at all, I send them an individual email and say, missed you in class, is there a reason, you haven't been coming?
Sometimes
And
they
it's
forget
really
they
important.
registered for the
Yeah,
class.
it's really
exactly.
important that you attend class for these reasons. So I think that does help. Like you said, the status report, all of a sudden they started showing up.
No, and also the email me or come and talk to you, because I can, come to my office hours, I can need repeating that.
So we're running out of time, so let me really, for both of us, let us thank you for coming. We look forward to having you in our spring workshop. The last thing that I would leave you with is a piece of advice, which is anytime you give instructions in a large lecture class, pause, don't move around, don't walk, pause, stay still, and give them directions, and you'll find out it will go up like 15%, the actual response and quality of the work. So again, thank you.
Thank you.